we are going to do is we're going to mute everybody's video and audio. That is not that you did anything wrong. It's just to preserve the bandwidth so that we don't have any issues with bandwidth, and make sure that the presenters are going to be able to be heard and seen without any technical glitches. Also, if you are familiar with Zoom, you're probably familiar with the chat feature. Feel free to use the chat feature. If you have questions, Dianne and Laura will be monitoring those questions. But when you do write down a specific question, if you could start that question with 2 question marks so that we can easily find those, they will be answered. Laura and Dianne will keep track of that. That is it in a nutshell as far as the housekeeping is concerned. We do have some other events that we have coming up in the next few months. I do invite you to visit the arizona.scbwi.org site. If you select the highlighted dates on the green calendar, that will be all the different events that are currently offered. That can be any of our free KLM, Kidlet Mingle meetings that are all held on Zoom. Plus we have some additional workshops that we are working on. But for now, I am going to mute myself and hide my video and hand it over to both Dianne and Laura. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thanks, Tanya. Welcome, everyone, to our second author and illustrator showcase for Arizona PAL members. And I'm going to let Laura, who is PAL coordinator with, co-PAL coordinator with me, introduce herself really quickly, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Dianne. Hi, I'm Laura Ellen. I am the young adult and middle grade novel coordinator for PAL, and this is our second showcase, so we're pretty excited about it. Looks like we've got a good turnout, so thanks for everyone for coming.
Great, and I'm Dianne White, and I'm the picture book half of the PAL coordinator group, and we're so glad that you joined us today. So we are really excited to welcome and celebrate the new books that are coming out or that have already come out by our PAL authors in Arizona. And I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. They will have about 5 minutes to let you know a little bit about their latest book, the projects that they're working on, and then Laura and I have prepared some questions, and we'll save some time at the end for your questions. And I'll remind you to go ahead and put those in the chat. And if you could start them with a couple of question marks, that will make it easy for us to pull those out at the end. So I'm just going to go based on who's first on my screen. And Jim, you are up.
Nice. Thank you, Dianne. My name is Jim Paillot. I'm an illustrator. Happy to be here. I hope I can offer any insight or tips for those that are watching. I've been an illustrator freelance for about 25 years now. I'm lucky because I've always wanted to be an artist. Ever since kindergarten, I know I wanted to be an artist. Except for that short time I wanted to be Tarzan, but that job was taken. So I went back to being an artist, and I love drawing. It's all I did. I graduated college with a BFA in fine arts. I stuck with it, but the thing about it is, right after college, I wound up getting a job at ad agencies and design firms, because even though I wanted to be an illustrator, I wasn't good enough. You know, a lot of people have amazing talent, and I was okay, but I really needed to keep working at it. So for about 10 or so years, while I did that kind of work, I also worked in the evenings and on weekends for magazines and newspapers. Remember newspapers? For people like Boston Globe and Wall Street Journal, and I did illustration for them. Now, I slowly got more and more work to where it was becoming an issue to have a full-time job and a freelance job. So I got to a point where I thought, well, I think I can just do this full-time. I think I can be an illustrator, which has been always my dream, full-time, you know, pay the rent, have some pizza now and then. So I quit my day job, and I've been doing this ever since. It's going pretty well. I exclusively work for the kids market. I do a lot of games and puzzle work and anything goofy or fun or silly. That seems to be the kind of calls I get, the kind of work I get. Lately, in the last decade or so, I've worked on a lot of chapter books, picture books and chapter books, and some game artwork. And some of the people I've worked with, I've been so fortunate. I get to work with some authors that are really talented. People like Trudy Truitt, her Secrets of a Lab Rat series. That was so fun to work on. You can't imagine how hard it is to work with somebody who isn't on the same page with you, who maybe you're not in sync with. Trudy and I are friends to this day. She's just wonderful. She's so talented, and she's moved on to other things too with other books. Most recently, I've been working with Dan Gutman on the My Weird School series. You may or may not know that series. They're a series of chapter books. This whole idea Dan Gutman came up with, so to get reluctant readers to start reading. And when we first started this, we thought, okay, we'll do about 3 or 4 books and it'll go okay and we'll move on, but it caught on so well that we've done over 80 books now. Some of them are early chapter readers. Some of them are chapter books. Some of we've done a game. We've done a lot of stuff, and that's gone so well that HarperCollins came to us about 1.5 years ago and said, would you be willing or interested in doing a graphic novel? And I've always loved comic books. So we did a graphic novel, Mr. Corbett Is in Orbit. That has really caught on. So currently I'm working on graphic novel number 2. So that's been a big hit. This came out in January. And so the thing about the graphic novel has been such a great learning experience for Dan and I. It made him write different. He's still funny. He still has all the characters doing what they need to do. But as an artist, I had to get back into my 4th grade comic book mode, and which I've loved. And so, but you have to think about things, the pacing of the story. And for me, coming up with a storyboard is very important. Dan did an early storyboard based on his manuscript. And then I took that and did a more refined or detailed storyboard, because it's important with graphic novels that the chapters end at a point where you want to turn that page. That's true with any book, especially chapter books. But on a graphic novel, you've got the extra weight of making it visually impactful. And so that's been a great and fun challenge. And so we're doing that together. We're working on graphic novel number 2. And so for me, all of this has been wonderful, because I work with clients that really value goofy, fun art that at times is almost pointless, but it's always geared towards getting reluctant readers to read and for kids to have fun for fun's sake.
Wow, that's amazing. And I just want to point out, Jim, that I read 27 million copies of the Dan Gutman books.
Yes, isn't that crazy?
That's no small number.
Yeah, exactly.
So we will look forward to some questions from our audience about the process of switching over to the graphic novel format, because I know that has been different.
Mm-hmm.
So now, thank you so much. And we're going to go to Dawn, and we'd love to hear about your latest book, Dawn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn. First, I have to say, Jim, your books are incredibly effective. My son did not like to read at all. And I'm very familiar with the fact that AJ does not like school. So
thank you.
We have so many of them, and they were a blessing to our family. They really were. And some of them, my son is going to be 20, and I cannot get rid of some of those books, because they really mean a lot to us, because they really opened up a whole new world to him. So thank you. And the illustrations pulled him right in. So those books are near and dear to us. So anyway, I don't write chapter books. I write picture books. And my latest one is called The Night Baa-fore Easter. So it's a follow-on to my first book, which is called The Night Baa-fore Christmas. So, but I didn't, I'll go back a little bit. I started out, I'm actually in engineering. I have an engineering degree. So I went to school to be a mechanical engineer. After I graduated from Villanova, who's playing today in a few hours, I got a job at Honeywell. So I worked there for close to 17 years. And then I had 3 kids, and I decided it was time for me to just take some time away from work, leave the corporate world for a while, be with my kids. And I started reading picture books, and I was hooked. Then I started thinking maybe I could write one. And I too like humor. And so I started messing around, and I got addicted, and I couldn't go back. So I never went back to the corporate world, started writing. I started out writing in rhyme because I just, to me, it's sort of mathematical. I love numbers. I still love math. My books all have numbers in them. And then I migrated to prose. So my next book after Christmas is Counting Elephants, which has a lot of math in it. So I do like to write STEM stories because I have a STEM background. But I also like to just make kids laugh. I love silly stories. So The Night Baa-fore Christmas came out first. Then Counting Elephants was actually my first book deal. But The Night Baa-fore Christmas came out before Counting Elephants did. And then The Night Baa-fore Easter. And then in June, I have The Night Baa-fore the First Day of School is coming out. And then this fall, I have a book called Once Upon a Christmas coming out, which is not in rhyme, it's in prose, and it is like a fractured fairy tale and more. It's more of a make-believe mashup because it's got fractured fairy tales and mythological creatures, and it's kind of got everything in it. So I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to see my rhyming books and my prose books in print, although rhyme is near and dear to my heart. So with that said, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek at The Night Baa-fore Easter. Again, so fortunate. My illustrator for these books is Paillot, and I can't even say enough about his work. I think he's brilliant. My illustrator for Counting Elephants was Fermin Solis. Love his work. And my illustrator for Once Upon a Christmas is Kenneth Anderson. And his work is fabulous. So what more could a person ask for, right? Okay, so this is The Night Baa-fore Easter. This is Bo. And Bo gets so excited for holidays that he just can't sleep, much like my kids when they were young. And that's actually how these series originated. So he decides he's going to count sheep. But the sheep, like toddlers, when they get excited, get a little carried away, and it doesn't quite work out as well as Bo had hoped. I'll read just a few pages so you get a sense for it. Okay. Excited for Easter, Bo can't fall asleep. He fluffs up his pillow and calls on the sheep. Tonight's Easter Eve, when the bunny hides eggs for kids who are sleeping. Please help me, Bo begs. These are some crazy sheep. So they think he wants to play hide and go seek. They hear the word hide and they want to play too. Just jump and I'll count. I'm not looking for you. They cover Bo's eyes and they sneak out to hide. All right, I'm not going to give any more away, but they discover Easter. And things get a little crazy from there. And then in the end, Bo kind of rounds them up, but there's a little twist at the end there. So again, my hope is to just make kids laugh and for everyone to see that the spirit of holidays is just, you know, just fills up toddlers and young kids, and you can't help but just feel the excitement that, you know, kids have that time for any holiday or any event like the first day of school. So Thank you. Oh, you're muted. Okay.
Thank you, Dawn.
Sure.
And we will look forward to hearing more about, because you've actually in the last several years sold quite a few books and have had a bunch come out in just the last, since last year, right?
Three
And
this
more-
year. Yeah, three
Yeah.
this year, one last year, and one the year before.
Yeah, so you're just going to town. So we'll, I'm sure I have lots of questions about that. Now we're going to move on to Judi and ask her to share her newest book with us.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I have several published books, but I'm really excited to share with you this new book, Please Don't Give Me a Hug. I don't know how many of you are huggers, but I'm a hugger. And I have to say the pandemic has been a deprivation for me as far as getting hugs. But I know that there are many children and many people who don't prefer to be hugged. In fact, years ago, when there was a film about the hugging guru named Amma, I was one of those people who stood outside of the Loft Theater in Tucson wearing a hug me sign and got lots of hugs from the community. So this is an interesting book for me because one of my grandson's favorite books is The Hug Machine. And if you're a board book person, you know The Hug Machine. And so I thought a lot about this book before writing it. The interesting thing for me is that Make Way for Books in Tucson, which is a nonprofit, I've been a promoter and supporter of Make Way for Books since they started. And a few years ago, they asked members of the writing community in Tucson to submit ebooks for their app. And they were donations. They gave us a list of topics that childcare providers and parents had asked for. And so I took this list to my writers group and I shared with them that I was going to write for and give a free story to Make Way for Books. The interesting thing for me is that I'd never written for a contest. I'd never written a work for hire. I never had written for someone else's topic or theme. So the thing that jumped out at me from this list was kids who don't like to be hugged. And so that's how the book came to be. At the same time, in my writers group, I had been learning more about children with autism who do not prefer to be hugged or touched. And I started thinking also about the importance of children having agency to determine how much touch they really want to have in their lives and how it's a real cultural thing, it's a personal thing. And for children to have that opportunity to make those choices and let their peers know and the adults in their lives know how much physical touch they want. So the whole idea of consent has grown since I actually submitted that story to Make Way for Books. Make Way for Books published it in both English and in Spanish, and you can find it on their app. So coincidentally, also for me, my publisher of this book doesn't like to be hugged. And so that was just a real surprise, even though she's been hugging me for years. She published this book, Vamos a leer, please read to me. And so she said, you know, what do you have lately? And I told her about the Make Way for Books story on their app, and she agreed to publish Please Don't Give Me a Hug. And it is illustrated by Estelle Cork. And I am not an illustrator. I admire those in the room who are. But in order to be fair to this little board book, I would like to share a quick PowerPoint so you can see the illustrations as I read the book to you. So here it is. Please don't give me a hug. You can give me a wink, a wave, or a big wide smile, but please don't give me a bear hug. You can give me a fist bump, a high five, or a soft pat on the back, but please don't give me a bear hug. You can give me the high sign, or a coochie coo, or blow me a sweet air kiss. But please don't give me a hug. Wait for me to hug you. So it's short and it's sweet. My grandson, who's 3 years old, when I shared the galley of the book with him, he started ending our video chats by blowing me kisses, which he learned to do. He now has mastered all of the ways to say hello that are featured in the book, except for winking. He's still working on winking. So I look forward to answering your questions, and I thank you for allowing me to introduce. Please don't give me a hug.
Thank you, Judi. That was very fun to see. And I've been putting links to the authors and illustrators websites and to purchasing or pre-ordering the book. So check that out in the chat, and don't forget to add your questions. And finally, we're going to go to Nate and hear from you about your latest book.
Hi, thanks. I'm glad I get to go last. That was a little intimidating. It was so, I mean, it's just so much fun to hear about what people are working on and the different interests and like that. It's just really inspiring. Let me see, like Jim, I started out as an illustrator, and Jim, you know, it's like our ages show, because I started working at Hallmark cards, and like, you know, now I teach art, and I don't think my kids have any idea what a card even is anymore, you know? But like you, I mean, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to get into picture books. And like, I just wasn't ready, you know, and Hallmark took me on, and I really learned the craft. I mean, I'm literally sitting in an office building with like 800 other artists. And it was just so easy to go to each one and say, well, how'd you do this? Or how'd you do that? And I really learned about technique and painting materials. And I mean, I didn't know anything. And my first book, let's see. So I worked at Hallmark for about 10 years, and the Kansas City Zoo, as a fundraiser, they created a picture book contest. And so I entered that contest and I won, and I thought, oh, this is a sign, I'm ready. So I took that contest and I quit Hallmark, and that turned into like 20 to, I don't know, 20 to 30 years of like freelance drawing and painting. Wow. And I think I was looking for an agent, and at the same time I was submitting artwork to publishers, and Scholastic, an editor at Scholastic named Edie Weinberg, who I will be forever grateful to, she just said, oh, I see you have a lot of monsters in your portfolio, and we're doing a Halloween book, and I would like to hire you for this book. So I took that job, and then I started going to agents and saying, hey, I have a book, obviously, you know, I'm worth investing in of your time and effort. And I discovered it was so much easier to get an agent at that point than it had been prior to that. So that kind of started me. After that, I was just working regularly, doing all kinds of different projects. You know, kind of like Jim was saying, puzzles and like educational books and picture books. And it was great. It was wonderful. And I always wanted to write, and I was always sort of dabbling and trying to write picture books and trying to figure out, you know, why my manuscripts weren't good enough yet, maybe, you know. And they already, you know, the moderators of this session told us not to cry, and it was like, okay, we'll see. Because the way that I really started writing was when my wife got sick with cancer. Dang it. Okay. Because I traveled with her everywhere, and this was for like a couple of years, literally I couldn't illustrate anymore because, iPads weren't a thing. It was like, you really couldn't bring your paints and all that. And so I thought, well, this is the time I'm really going to start writing. So it was literally in her hospital room that I started really focusing on writing. And I love books on writing. I was reading everything. I think I joined SCBWI at that point. I was already a member, but they have so much good information. And I feel like I just kind of through sheer will, I sort of carved a niche for myself as a writer. And after a while, the publishers it was kind of gratifying and sort of mortifying at the same time, because they were like, well, we don't really want your artwork anymore, but boy, we really like this story. So now I'm a full-time writer, as opposed to writer illustrator. I haven't illustrated anything in the year since my wife died. I think that was just like that part of my life just sort of dropped away. And now it's all about writing. And mostly I concentrate on picture books, but I really want to try to like claw my way up the skill set ladder and write like middle grade. So I'm working on a middle grade graphic novel right now. I'm sort of trying to figure that out. And Jim, at some point, I really want to pick your brain in terms of the format and, how did you do the lettering and all of that. So I'm really interested in that. That was, and your work is completely inspiring to me. It's just so charming and full of humor. And you're like a really inspirational artist for me. Anyway, God, I feel like I'm going on and on. Anyway, so Mother Goose to the Rescue is my latest picture book. And this really was kind of an exercise in just sheer will. Like, I will not give up on this idea, because it started out as dinosaur firefighters. And then somebody else hit the market first with that concept. And it's just kind of like, dang it, now what? So like, probably over the course of a decade, my co-author and I, Stephanie Wynn Brown, we sort of went back and forth about what to do. And I think we changed it to animals, and that wasn't quite right. And I don't know, we were just trying different things. And I mean, literally my poor agent, like maybe once a year, once 2 years, she'd get another version of this manuscript. And just bless her for the patience and the sheer kindness of looking at this. And so finally we hit on the idea of Mother Goose characters as firefighters. Stephanie lives in LA and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. And over the past few years, there's just been this terrible fires. And we were just determined to write this book as kind of a love letter to firefighters. And so we hit on the idea of the Mother Goose nursery rhyme characters, almost like a volunteer fire department. And it's kind of one of those ideas where your agent gets the manuscript and she goes, "Oh, I think this will sell." So it's kind of nice when you hear those words, and sure enough, it did. And another thing that's fun is, as the artist or as the illustrator, as the author, to wait for the illustrator to start submitting sketches, because you're just like, what is this person going to come up with? Like, I already envision it a certain way in my head. Invariably, the artists come up with stuff that it's just so mind-bogglingly amazing. And they'll do little jokes and little twists that you never would have thought of. And it's just, I mean, even though it's a collaboration that you don't really participate in as an author, it still feels like a collaboration with that illustrator. And it's just so wonderful, the things that they bring. And Jessica Gibson illustrated Mother Goose to the Rescue, and her work is just so charming and textural, and I just loved it. So let me read a little bit, and then I'll just shut up. So we started, like I said, we really wanted this to be a love letter to firefighters. And so we start off with, what are firefighters made of? What are firefighters made of? Courage and wit and tons of grit. That's what firefighters are made of. And that just felt so true. I mean, especially, you know, watching Stephanie in LA with all the terrible wildfires and stuff, we just feel so grateful, you know? So here's all the nursery rhymes in their sort of everyday personas. And then as firefighters, I love this book. I mean, I'm sure every author will say, I love this book, but I love this book. And again, I work with a couple of different, I love collaboration, and I will always reach out to that spirit of creative kind of back and forth. It's just so joyful. And for poetry, I work with Stephanie Gwynn Brown, and it was just so fun to go back and forth and try and come up with these rhymes and what characters could we include. And so this is what we came up with. So let's see. Ding dong, alarm bells chime in Mother Goose's house of rhyme. Help us please, calls Queen of Hearts. 911, we've burned our tarts. So here's the Queen over here. Buttered dough slipped off the rack. Hot cinders flew like jumping jacks. Such tiny sparks, they are to blame. And our poor castle's not the same. So all the firefighters now, they spring into action. Hickory dickory dock, let's race to beat the clock. Gear up in 40 seconds flat. Strap on boots, striped coats, and hats. And one thing that was really important to us is that for the most part, this book is very accurate in terms of the life of a firefighter. I think it was Kirkus or Library School Journal, they were like, this book is incredibly accurate right up until the end when you put out fire with jelly. And I'm thinking, that probably wouldn't help. And I was like, okay, there's a lamb flying the helicopter. I think there's other issues that are happening here. But anyway, except for the very end, it really was important to us to kind of accurately portray the actions and skills of a firefighter as they battle a blaze. So anyway, with that, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nate. That was really fascinating. We will want to hear more about the collaboration that you have done with other writers. But now kind of a general question for all of you, because I know a lot of our listeners are going to be wondering about, you kind of hinted at the various trajectories that you've taken, the path of starting one way, of wanting to get into illustration, but then maybe this kind of winding road of finding your path to where you are today. So I think maybe Judi can start, because I know you have you had a career as a librarian. Maybe you could just talk about that, and then others of you can jump in with maybe you know, some tips or some encouragement for those of our listeners who are on this journey, maybe haven't had their first book published and are trying to find their way. You know, however you want to hit that topic. We'll start with you, Judi.
Okay. Well, yes, I am still in the library field. I've been an educator, literacy coach, librarian. I have taught at the university level, children's literature, library science, and all its many configurations. But I always wanted to be a children's book author. And of course, as a librarian, I read tons and tons and tons of books. Also as a mother, reading lots of books with our daughter. And so the path for me was late in life. I was 47 years old when my first children's book was published. I was a school librarian at the time at Corbett Elementary School here in Tucson. And I had multiple rejections for the manuscript that eventually became my first book, which is now out of print, called Sing Down the Rain. But the way I got connected to that publisher was through Michael LaCappa, who was the author illustrator guest speaker in my library. And I told him about my manuscript and he introduced me to the publisher. And that's sort of how my career has gone, is through personal connections. I have 4 published books. I'm very proud of each one of them. I'm not as prolific as my colleagues on the Zoom today, but it's always been through professional connections. So if you're working in schools or in the library field, I encourage you to follow blogs and read reviews and find out what's happening in the world of children's, middle grade, and young adult literature, and to look for those places where you might be able to fill in a gap. I believe that's kind of what happened to me with my second book, Read to Me, Vamos a leer. It was originally written as a poem for Project Lift, which was a program through the Pima County Public Library for pregnant teens. And it was to encourage them to read to their babies. And so it was just by coincidence that I had written some book reviews for Starbright Books after our neighbor, Ron Himmler, who's a very excellent illustrator and author. And I had met in the produce section of the market. He told me about this book that he had just published with Starbright Books. I wrote a review. They asked me to start writing reviews, and the next thing I knew, they were publishing my second book. So I think that's just looking for those opportunities. I don't know if another opportunity will come my way for a 5th book, but I continue to write and remain hopeful. Thanks.
Great, thanks. I think you make a good point, and probably our other author illustrators would also agree that connecting with people in the Kidlit community is one of the ways that we can find new work and stay kind of up to date with what's happening. So maybe Jim, do you want to jump in and just talk about, either your little more of your path or maybe some tips for aspiring illustrators?
Sure. I love what Nate had to say earlier about he was resilient and he stuck to his idea, and he finally got his book published in a form that he's very happy with. And I think anybody who's written and has been an illustrator has got to go through that. You can't, well, very rarely does it happen to where I wrote this thing and it's going to be gold. Well, wonderful for you, and I hope that happens, but more likely it's going to take different shapes and different forms, and somebody won't see it as the vision you see it. They won't see it as this golden thing. And so you're going to have to take a step back and say, well, maybe they're right, or maybe they're not right. Maybe you are, but the point is, you need to look at it with fresh eyes. And I've found, at least in the Phoenix community, a group of friends, we get together and we Zoom and we share our work with each other. And we're honest, we're nice, but we're honest about what we're seeing and what's going on. And what I like about that is that you can share critique in an area where, because let's face it, whether you're an author or an illustrator, you're in solitude, you're in solitary confinement. It's a very solitary job. You're doing this thing and it's way harder than it looks. And nothing's harder than writing. And that includes illustration. I think that's easy compared to writing. Writing is hard because it can be drudgery, and it can be, you're trying to find the right word and you're banging your head against the wall. And so I think when you hit upon just the right things, it might be just right, just the right story, but it's good to get feedback from other pros that have had success. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it does mean you should listen to them, because maybe they have a point. Maybe they've got a point of view, and maybe you could at the very least say, wonder what made them think that about that work, or about what I wrote, to where they think that. Even though I don't agree, I wonder what made them think that. And it'll give you a fresh approach. And one other thing that struck me about what Nate had to say and what all of us have gone through up here is you've got to be resilient and a little bit flexible, but you're going to get knocked down, and it's not just about getting back up. You know, you're going to get rejections, you're going to get all that stuff and critiqued and unfairly critiqued at that. But when you get back up, it's not just getting back up and keep trying. It's what you do with that. You know, it's what you do with that information. And did you learn anything from that and take that knowledge and move forward? Sorry, I rambled, but.
That was awesome. You make the point that I think we all, those of us that have been members of SCBWI for a long time, know is that we need each other, that we depend on our critique partners, and that we aren't always the best judge of our own work, that sometimes we spend so much time with it that, you know, we get sort of blind to our, you know, weaknesses. So a good critique group is really, really important. So Dawn, what would you like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, my story, particularly for the Night Baa-fore Easter and the Night Baa-fore Christmas and the first day of school, is very similar. It did not start out like that. My daughter was having trouble sleeping at night, so it was called Good Night Thoughts. And it was about all these different things you could think about to ease your mind and have fun and, you know, go to sleep with these really pleasant thoughts. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of boring. And it was just, you know, just little snippets of different scenarios. So then I thought, well, if a child really had trouble falling asleep, they might count sheep. So then I took it in that direction. So Nate, like you, I didn't give up. I just kept, like, the same theme was there, you know, the sleeping and the good thoughts. So then I put the sheep and all these places together, but then it kind of really got out of control. So then I thought, well, maybe there's just a single event or a single holiday that they're excited about. And that's when the idea for Christmas came to me. And so if you want to talk about resilience, so I had an agent at the time when I was finalizing the Night Baa-fore Christmas. And I saw a post on a blog that said that my publisher was accepting submissions for holiday stories. So I emailed my agent and I said, hey, I saw this call for submissions. Do you think we could submit? And she dropped me that day. So that was a really hard day. She didn't drop me because of that. She had personal reasons. She wanted to shrink her client base. It was in the end, it was a good thing that happened. So I went and I submitted that story on my own. And so the Night Baa-fore Christmas was a snail mail, you know, letter submission that led to a 3-book series and potentially 4. And one of her other reasons for not submitting it, she said, oh, that publisher is kind of small. Well, they got bought by Hachette that same year. So they're not really that small anymore. So that was a really hard day for me, like really hard. I thought, yeah, we got somebody who's looking for a story specifically, and I didn't have the opportunity, and I no longer had an agent. And I think she's still on here. Thank God for Tanya, who is one of my critique partners, pulled me off the ledge and said, no, you're not giving up. So I didn't, obviously. And I, you know, that would have been like I probably would have quit for about 5 minutes, and I would have been the only one that knew it because I was so addicted to writing. I was never really going to quit, but telling myself I was going to quit was making me feel better. So I kind of got it out of my system, bounced back. But, you know, it's just like that. There's highs and there's lows, you know, and the lows can be really low. But the highs can be really high. You just have to understand that, you know, you gotta find that balance in between. You can't get your expectations too high, but you can't expect the worst. It balances itself out. And if you love doing it, you know, you'll get your opportunities if you hang in there and you do it right.
Thank you, Dawn. That's inspirational. There's always, I'm sure every one of us has times when we've been disappointed, when things haven't gone the way that we hoped they would. We felt confident in something, and yet somehow, something happens to make it not go the way that we had planned. So Nate, you want to finish off this first question, and then Laura's going to follow up. Any tips or, daily strategies, things that you do to keep yourself moving forward?
You know, I think my first response is I joined SCBWI like several decades ago. And I have to say, like, I also moved a lot because I was a freelance artist and I could literally live anywhere I wanted to. So I moved to Boulder. I moved, it's like I've lived in Los Angeles. I mean, I've lived all over. And I think for me, like I'm an introvert and I'm used to just sitting in my studio and working, painting, whatever. It was hard for me to meet people because a lot of times you meet people through work or whatever. So SCBWI became kind of like a lifeline. And the first thing that I would do when I would move to a new town is reach out to the local SCBWI community. And that was how I met Stephanie Gwynn Brown. That was how I met Amy Fellner-Dominy. It was like these, my future collaborators, I met them at SCBWI events, and it's like it's an opportunity to meet a lot of like-minded people with similar interests. And it was just a wonderful sense of community, like always, I lived in it. I lived in the South in Georgia. It was like I belonged to all the little regional SCBWI, contingents. But it really was. And it was like, with Stephanie, I write rhyme. With Amy, we write more like sort of typical prose picture books. But I love that sense of collaboration. And I think part of it is because I was so in my studio for 2 decades. At the end of that, I was just like, forget this. So I need people. So it really became a way of, I think, kind of reinventing my creative output in some ways, whether it's trying to write in rhyme or, I don't know. It's just like at this point in my career and at my age, like my reset question to myself is always, what am I most passionate about? What am I not, what the market is doing? What should I be doing digitally or whatever? That's all of that is important, but it really comes down to, like Jim was saying, writing is tough and it's joyful and it's misery often in the same day. And it becomes, how can I get myself into my chair, really wrestling with these words? And it really comes down to, what am I in love with? What ideas do I love? And that's really, whether my agent thinks it's a great idea or not, that becomes like the path that I follow, every time. So that's it. I'm like, oh God, shut up.
Thank you.
Nate.
Go ahead, Laura.
All right. Yeah, I really like what Nate, what you were saying about the community of SCBWI, because I first joined when I lived in Alaska, and everything was so spread out. And then I moved to Michigan and I was there for a long time. And then when we moved to Arizona, that was the first thing I did was, find SCBWI and get involved. So it is one of the best things about SCBWI. I totally agree. So I wanted to kind of touch on collaboration. All of you in one way or another work with, whether it's you're writing picture books and you're working with an illustrator. Obviously, you don't ever collaborate with that illustrator. But Nate, you talked about how you are actually collaborating with another author. So I wondered if you could start us off and kind of talk about what that process is like. And then for the other 3 of you, if you could kind of talk about your process as far as you know, working when you're writing for those aspiring picture book authors in the audience. I know as a novel writer, you know, I just write by myself. You know, I don't have to worry about taking out words to make sure that the illustrator has something to work with and that kind of stuff. So if the other three, if you guys could kind of talk to that, but Nate, if you could kind of walk us through how your process is with working with these other authors when you're writing your picture book.
It definitely varies. Like Stephanie lives in Los Angeles, so she and I work long distance. And I have to say, you know, like I don't really understand computers and social media, but you know, the digital communication that's happening right now really allows us to work almost as if we're in the same room. But the thing that's wonderful with Stephanie is that like, and this is part of the collaboration that I just love, is that maybe I'll get an email from her and overnight she'll have written, you know, an amazing line or come up with a wonderful rhyme or something like that. And that's, you know, I love to be surprised. It's like, as an author sitting in your chair writing your story, like, I mean, sure, you can get like brainstorms and, oh, I didn't realize my character was going to do that or whatever. And that can be its own sort of surprise. But this is much more like a visceral, like you open an email and here's a rhyme about, you know, Jack and Jill. And that's just it. I don't know, the joyful surprise that brings is just fantastic. And then Amy and I, we literally like meet at a Starbucks and just kind of hammer out the story together. You know, we'll talk about it. You know, we'll send a draft, you know, in between our meetings, we'll send drafts back and forth and kind of fine tune it that way. But, you know, I honestly don't know, like I can get so lost in my own head about what's good and what's bad and second guessing myself. Like I almost like work with a collaborator goes so much faster for me than trying to do something on my own. And you know, as others were saying, you got to find that critique group that you connect with who will give you that honest feedback. Because otherwise, I think I almost grind to a halt because I just, in some ways, I trust my own creative brain. So, but that's why collaboration. And before we went live, we were talking and I made a joke about I always wanted to be in a band. I think I've kind of found a literary equivalent of being in a rock band the way that I work, you know, so.
That's it's kind of interesting because I know like I said with being a novelist, you know, you are always in your head and you're always wondering, and the key is having someone to bounce that stuff off with, a critique group or whatever. So yeah, definitely. And so Jim, can you kind of walk us through your collaboration with how different is it, like with a graphic novel? Are you writing it? I mean, do you get like the words and then you have to do the storyboard, or do you guys work together back and forth on it? How does that work?
Well, Dan Gutman and I have, we talked about the theme beforehand, and we go back and forth and hey, let's do this, let's do one out in space, or hey, let's do one in space, you know, in state parks or whatever, and the kids get lost. So we bounce around ideas. And then after we kind of land on something, and he's the writer, and I'm very happy to take a step back and he's the leader in this. And so then he figures out, okay, I'm going to go with this idea, and that's it. He goes into his little writing cave and does his magic. And then I'll get a manuscript and we go over it, or he'll sometimes call ahead of time and say, hey, I've got that done and I've gone this direction, you know, so it's going to be really wacky. So, and then, so he'll send the manuscript just like a regular chapter book or a picture book. I'll read it over, you know, make sure I understand the jokes and the funny parts and what the characters look like. It's always fun. It's always important in all of these My Weird School books to understand what the characters look like. You know, if it's an old lady, she needs to look really old because there's some jokes later about what she does that you don't expect, you know, from her, or some variants on that. in collaboration in general on chapter books and stuff, I don't normally collaborate. Trudy Truitt and I collaborated on a book, and it was like magic, because we got on the phone and we went back and forth about ideas, what we want to happen to these characters. And it got to a point that I'd send her sketches. Hey, which one do you like for the lead character? And I'd send her some ideas on what these characters look like. And that was working like you all hope it would, you know, like, holy smokes, this is fun. And so we sent that around, and the agent took it around for a while, and it got some positive feedback and some not. And next thing you know, she got busy, I got busy, and it's out there. Hopefully we'll get back on it. But so the collaboration happens, but for me, not as much as for some of the picture book writers and artists. I don't, at least it doesn't for me for the chapter books or the graphic novel. At a certain point, he says, hey, do your magic. And I sit here and turn up the music and drink coffee and draw. And then he'll get that. And some feedback I'll get afterwards is the usual, like, hey, can this guy be bigger, or make sure we have that happening here. Mostly though, it's just, hey, this is great. Okay, thank you. And so it's lucky that we both feel that way about what each other contribute.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Dawn, now, and I imagine with, as a picture book author, you probably don't get to see you don't collaborate necessarily. Are you ever surprised by what the illustrator has come up with when you get when you get it back?
I've been really fortunate in both with Counting Elephants and with the Night Baa-fore series. My editor asked if I had ideas. Like when my Night Baa-fore editor wrote to me and said, hey, can you give me a list of illustrators that you think capture the spirit of your book? So I did, and I went to their website and I saw who they had used previously. And I thought, I like Pablo. I'm going to add him to my list. And they already know him. And so they picked Pablo. And then with Counting Elephants, they gave me a choice of 2. And I picked Fermin. And then, and they both accepted. And then before it got finalized, they sent me all the sketches and said, do you have anything to add? Is there anything you want done differently? What is your feeling? And of course, I didn't see any issues. But one thing that did surprise me was I always imagined the sheep would have big numbers on them, like the Serta commercial or whatever that everybody sees. But he put little tags on them, which is so cute because it doesn't distract the reader. You know, thinking about having these big numbers on their backs, I think now, oh, that would be kind of distracting. And now I love the fact that the books are like number identification. I call it like Where's Waldo with sheep, because when you read about a sheep doing something, and then like you can always say to the child, where is sheep 2? And then they look for the tag and they find the 2. And it's more of a search kind of game now, like a look and find. So I thought that was just brilliant. I mean, there's so many brilliant things that they did that I can't even, I still look at the book, I still look at the pages and find new things. Like when the first day of school one that's coming out, I still find things. So I've been really, really fortunate, and I did get some say-so, so I feel especially fortunate there, and even some say-so in the selection. I didn't have any say-so in the Once Upon a Christmas with Kenneth, but if I could have chosen him, I would have. If I had known to choose him, I absolutely would have chosen him. So yeah, I've been really fortunate.
Thank you. Judi, same question for you. How do you work with Illustrator? Do you just, does your publisher just send it or do you have any kind of say in who illustrates it?
Well, I'm very envious of the collaborators in the room. I also write professional books and conduct research, and that's always collaborative for me. But my children's book writing is pretty much a solo experience. I did try to write collaboratively collaboratively with a friend. And we ended up still being friends, but putting aside the work that we had done together. So I have had mixed experiences. In my third book, Ready and Waiting for You, Erdman's gave me the opportunity to recommend an illustrator, which I did. I recommended Catherine Stock, and similar to Dawn, I had looked at their list and picked someone that they knew, and someone whose work I really admired. And then she decided to do something totally different from any of her other work. So when I actually saw this book, I was really shocked. That was a real surprise. But to say something really positive about Starbright Books, which I really want to do, they write in 25 different languages for young children. And one of the things I always know when, for these two Starbright books, is that they will be sensitive to culture, to gender, to ability, to everything. They're very culturally conscious. And so I don't have the same concern about not seeing the illustrations in advance. I did not see the illustrations in advance for either of these books, but because I know the publisher and the art director, I feel more confident about the final result. I was spoiled because my first book, I actually bought the illustrations and I got to work with the illustrator side by side for what was going to be in the book. And then since then, my life has been more of, you know, crossing my fingers and praying a lot. So I really admire those who get to collaborate. And one of the great sessions that was at the Tucson Festival of Books was with collaborating author illustrators, and I highly recommend it. It was, Matt de la Pena and Christian. And the other two were Aaron's, Philip Stead, and now the other name has gone out of my head. But if you didn't take advantage of the Tucson Festival of Books, all of those sessions are available for on demand. And there are a lot of great authors and illustrators whose process and experiences you can learn from. So I highly recommend that.
Awesome.
That's great. Well, Laura, I think it's maybe time for us to share some of the questions from the audience.
Can I jump in for just a quick moment?
Absolutely.
First of all, I'm so excited about that, what you just were sharing about the Tucson Festival of Books. I mean, I felt because of, you know, the pandemic to not be able to go to Tucson every year and see these wonderful things. So that's, I'm looking forward to seeing like Matt and Christian talk about their books. And I mean, that would just be fantastic. I get this question a lot, and I want to just kind of restate it here. For those of you who are writing picture books, you do not need to think about the illustrator. I mean, I get so many people coming to me and saying, you know, I've written this manuscript and I've reached out to my brother-in-law who's who does commercial illustration or something. But it's like, please don't hire somebody yourself. I mean, unless you're a professional illustrator yourself. I mean, I think publishers kind of like that. They love the sort of author illustrator and one person dynamic, but please don't, reach out to a local illustrator, because what will happen is you'll send your manuscript in with the illustrations and the publisher is like, well, kind of like the manuscript, but if it's tied to this illustrator, I don't want this project. And it's easier for them just to turn it down than it is to say, how would you feel about working with a different illustrator? Because that can get dicey. They don't know the relationship, the dynamic. So just submit your manuscript. Don't worry about the illustrations. If the publishers love your work, they love your manuscript, they will find the perfect illustrator for you, at least in their own brain. This is the perfect match for your words. So don't do illustrations. That's my foundational law.
Yeah, that's wise advice. Kind of a given, I think. If you write picture books, you just know that the writing is, for the writer, and the illustrating is for the illustrator, and they always add things that we, wouldn't have thought to ask for, but appreciate so much when we see our work. So let's see. One of the questions from Dianne White was, which of the presenters have agents and which ones don't? And maybe a corollary to that is, what's that relationship look like? How does that work? Dawn, you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I fortunately have an agent. I did get dropped in that one fall there of 2018, I think it was. And then I submitted the night before Christmas on my own. In the meantime, I was on an agent search, and I read a few books, picture books, and I thought, wow, this humor is like my humor. This agent who gets this person would probably get me, maybe would think I'm funny. So I submitted to this person's agent, and I got the phone call, and I immediately signed with my agent, who is still my agent now. So that's been, what, I don't know, 2 years or so, and it's been a great experience. Couldn't be happier. She gives me feedback. I do collaborate, with her somewhat. She doesn't like do line edits. She edits. She will give me feedback. She'll tell me what areas aren't working. I wrote a picture book recently, and she's not the before, another one. And she said, I think this should be a series. She said, send it back to me when you have 2 more that are, along with the same character. So I did. And I wouldn't have thought to do that. That was, her suggestion. So yeah, I'm with my agent. Sometimes we will email a few times in 1 week. Sometimes I won't hear from her for a few weeks. But it works for me. I hear from her when I need to, and I don't need to hear from her all the time. We mostly email. We've been on the phone once, but that works for me. I'm good with email. So yes, I have a great agent, and so I'm happy.
Nate, you look like you're
I
gonna
know,
jump in there.
Shall I jump in? Is the silence awkward? I can jump in. I'm on my third. I'm on my third agent, and again, not to kind of keep blowing the SCBWI horn, but that's how I met my agent. Again, there are events where agents will come in, editors will come in, and to really have a chance to meet those people and to just see if there's, like Don was saying, you want to find that agent that shares your kind of sensibility. And, when I think back to when I was just leaving Hallmark and trying to figure out picture books, I was just so desperate to have kind of any agent, and I think I looked in Writers Marketplace or something. Anyway, there was a book that came out every year, and it would list the agents and what they're looking for, which you still need to do that. You don't want, if some agent handles, romantic YA, you don't want to be submitting picture books. But I think I signed with a guy who, was just some guy in an apartment somewhere, and he kept writing me letters about how his back was hurting, and he was on the couch and he couldn't send out my work yet. And this went on for like 6 months. And, I look back now and I laugh, but I remember at the time I was just almost so grateful that someone had even signed me. And I don't think he ever sent out anything that I sent him. So it's almost like approach the search for an agent with some ego, like, who will really work for me? Where's that? I want that sense of partnership. maybe I want to meet this person or talk to this person, which, you know, takes a lot of courage, but you don't want to end up in my situation where it's a guy on a couch not doing anything for 6 months. So it's like what Don was saying, you really want to find that partner. You know, you really want to, like for an agent to say to you, oh, I think this is a series, that's the writer's dream come true, you know? So give yourself some grace and some space to really kind of pick and choose your agent, as opposed to you'll just take the first person that will give you the time of day, you know?
Good advice. Let's see. Since we've only got a few more minutes, maybe we should jump to another question. There was one about illustrating from Tom Tate. Jim and Nate, what's the most difficult aspect of illustrating for you? What project was the most difficult?
For me, it's the projects that take months to do. I've got the attention span of like a small mammal. I just, you know, I love 2-week jobs. You know, oh, this will take 2 weeks. I'm on it. You know, send it over. But when it gets longer than that, then I've got to plan things out. I've got a storyboard. I've got to make lists, and I've got a calendar next to me, so I don't drop the ball at some point. And so I then all of a sudden I have to wear a couple other hats and to keep that project moving. In addition to the other projects that I'm working on, there's always at least 3 to 4 books going on here. And so I've got to manage my time. So for me, it's like this graphic novel. It's these giant epic things. Those are for me the hardest to handle.
Just to follow up on that, is the chapter book versus the graphic novel, how do those compare in time spent or process?
It goes like this. We do the cover first, like almost like a couple of months in advance of the regular book. Sometimes I've done the cover toward the story's not written yet. We have an idea of what's going to happen. And so I do the cover full color, a sketch in a day, and then the final art, maybe 2 or 3 days. And then for the interior art, there's between 25 and 35 illustrations per book, and they're all black and white. Well, for that, I need about a month. You know, I need about a week, about 10 days to do the sketches, and then a month for the final art. And it's typically because I'm also balancing that with another book behind it, another book behind that. So I'm kind of like, this day I'm working on a cover, but tomorrow and the next day I'm going to be working on the interior for another book. So that's the kind of what I meant about I have a calendar right next to me to make sure things are moving in this old art factory.
And that gives you the variety that you need to keep your attention.
Yes.
Interest.
A question I get is, aren't you sick of these characters you draw? About so many, you know, over 80 books with the same characters. I'm not. I really like the characters. I like the writer. I like my art director and designer at HarperCollins. I like all these people, and I really like the stories and the characters. So I'm not bored with that at all. If I get bored, it's because I'm not keeping myself creatively pumped. You know, school visits and visits with my author and illustrator friends, that keeps me revved up. So during the pandemic, that's been a little bit tougher because of that. But those things keep me pumped up, you know.
And just to finish off, sorry about that, but the graphic novel versus the chapter book where you've got the black and white illustrations, the graphic novel, what time frame does that look for you to finish all those illustrations?
Oh, the graphic novel for the final art about 2.5 months, and it took about a month to do the sketches. I just thought, okay, this is going to kill me. I'm not even making that. I just thought, well, they're going to just find me, you know, laying here some morning. But it wasn't. Once I planned it all out, it was hard. But the thing was hard was the mental part of it. A long project is just, you know, I tend to look out windows and look around, but so I got to stay focused, and I can do that if I'm spacing it with other work, you know. So those are long projects, the sketching and the final art. Final art goes quicker than you would think, because while I'm sketching, I'm also thinking of color and what I'm going to do with this. And so the final art, I just crank up the music and go into art mode. But the sketching, you know, that's a lot of thought there. It hurts my brain.
Great, thanks for that. Judy, we have a question about board books. You have written several. Do you have any tips for writing and submitting them?
Well, I love board books because I love the idea of being a partner on a grandmother or mother or older sibling's lap while a very young child is being read to. That's really a satisfying thought for me. So my only experience is with Starbright Books, and they do lots and lots of board books. I actually worked for Starbright for 2.5 years, so I had the opportunity to read lots of submissions of board books. I just recommend reading board books and finding very young children to share your ideas with. I wanted to go back to something that Nate said about and not, as a writer, not looking for an illustrator. The other problem for us as writers of board books or picture books is that when we want to share our stories with young children, they need the pictures. And we also, in our own minds, are creating these pictures as we're writing. And so there is that tension for us with trying to create something that really will engage a reader, a young reader in particular, without having any pictures to share. And that's why all of my books include some kind of participation by the listener. And that's where I get my feedback from the young readers. So yeah, I just think read them and look at what young children are enjoying. And I can't recommend Starbright highly enough. There are other publishers doing board books now, but they've been doing them for 20 years consistently, and they do good work.
Great. Any other questions, Laura?
Nope. Do we have any in the?
Let's
the
see.
chat?
John asked Dawn, who was your publisher?
My publisher for all of my books is Hachette, but I'm with Running Press Kids for Counting Elephants and with Worthy Kids for the Night Baa-fore series and for Once Upon a Christmas.
Great. Let's see. I think, let me see if there's any more questions. I think that was everything. Any last thoughts before we sign off? One last tip for of encouragement for our members.
Sure, I'll say definitely find a critique group. If you can find a critique group that has an illustrator in it too, bonus, because that really helps you know whether or not you're providing enough visual space, whether you are saying things and sharing things that the illustrator could do probably better than you can. It's good to have all levels. You want to be in a group with people who are published, even if you're not, because they'll share some experience with you that you don't have. And if you're published, you know, welcome people that are not. Just, you know, it's really hard sometimes to listen to that feedback or accept it because, you know, sometimes you want to take it personally. You don't have to incorporate their feedback, but you do have to listen because, you know, that's, you're asking them for feedback. They're giving it to you. The right thing to do is listen to it. And a lot of times they're right. So, you know, if at first it doesn't resonate with you, put it away. You might find that 2 weeks later, after you're like, okay, you know, maybe, you know, I do need some help. You might receive that feedback differently. And it may not be their feedback that you use, but maybe there's something that'll spark another idea that came from their feedback, because you'll start to open your mind more. And then the answer will be there, but they didn't really give it to you, but they got you there. So I don't know what I would do. I have 2 critique groups. I don't know what I would do without them. And a lot of times I know, like, like you have some friends, like you have your party friends or your coffee friends, or you go to lunch with friends. Like in my critique group too, like I know if I need something funny, I know I don't have to send it to the whole group. I know who I can send it to and be like, hey, help me with this line. Or like I feel like I'm missing some heart here, and I'll send it to that one. So like I kind of get a sense for who offers what, but usually I send it to everybody, but I don't like to overwhelm them either. But be with a critique group, develop those relationships, because they not only become critique partners, they become friends who get you through some of the hardest times in writing. I can vouch for that.
I like to say what Dawn said. I think it's really true. I've been through, in, I don't know, almost 25 years, 4 different critique groups. The most longest lived one was a group that met after we took a children's writing course together. When I have left a critique group, the problem has been me, is that I've gotten too busy doing other things and not really being able to give the kind of attention to the group that I would like to. So yes, find a critique group and keep writing. What Nate said too about writing what you're passionate about. I have a manuscript that I've been working on for 20 years, and it requires a great deal of research. And so I dip in and out of it, and every time I sit down to work on it again, I'm thrilled about it all over again. So keep your passion foremost in your mind as you're writing.
Great.
I mean, what Don and Judi said, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm so grateful to be hearing this wonderful advice. I'm so inspired, really, truly.
Great. And any final words from you, Jim, or what's next on your plate?
You know what? I agree with what everybody said. That's why I wasn't adding anything. It's really important for you to follow your passion. If you love scary stories, write that stuff. If you love drawing creepy stuff or scary stuff or cowboys, do that. Make that work for you, because it'll come across better. It'll be more sincere. Your passion will come through. So just follow that, even if a trend says pirates are big right now, or everybody's talking about circus right now. Well, that's nice, but just do what you do really well, and you have a better chance of that sincerity and passion coming through. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, that really gets to the whole idea of, why do we do this, and who are we as writers and illustrators? If we're just trying to write or draw to a particular market, we really are missing the boat. Our work is going to be successful when we're true to ourselves, I think. So,
yeah.
Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all your newest books and your expertise, and giving our members some insight into what it's like to be a working writer and illustrator.
And we want to thank Dianne and Laura for putting this together.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
All right, well, thank you so much. You guys all inspired me. I want to write picture books now.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.